Before we begin, take a long, unhurried breath. Let your shoulders ease down, and let the noise of the day move quietly behind you. If this story brings you rest, please like this video and subscribe to Calm History Daily, where each night we travel gently into another time and another life. Tonight, we follow a man whose world was made of flour, fire, and dawn. He was neither rich nor remarkable, yet every morning of his life began before the sun, and ended only when the last crust cooled in still air. This is the rhythm of a medieval baker. From flour to first light, the town lies still under a pale, moonlit hush. Its streets, narrow and twisting, run like veins through a body of stone and timber. Shutters are closed, yet faint threads of smoke curl from chimneys that hold on to yesterday's warmth. Somewhere beyond the marketplace, a single window glows faintly, like an ember refusing sleep. Inside that small bakery, the air remembers the heat of fire and the sweetness of bread. The walls are thick and low, made of rough plaster that bears the soot of generations. Every corner holds a shadow that moves slightly with the flame of the lamp. Wooden shelves bend under the weight of flour sacks, and on the long pine table, a fine dust lies across the grain, glimmering like frost in the dim light. Near the hearth, an oven crouches, a dome of stone and brick, blackened by years of flame. It is quiet now, but even cold it seems alive, its surface faintly warm to the touch, like the flank of a sleeping animal. The baker sleeps upstairs, in a narrow loft under the rafters. The smell of flour never leaves his clothes, not even in dreams. In his sleep, he breathes it, the mingled scents of smoke, yeast, and wood. When he wakes, it will already be halfway to morning, though the sky will still be dark. His hands, even before his mind fully stirs, will reach for work that has waited since yesterday. The dough resting in its wooden trough, the embers that must be coaxed to life, the clods that must be warmed before they touch new bread. Below, the last ember from the previous day flickers softly. A small wind passes under the door and makes the flame tremble, then straighten again. Outside, the river murmurs under its thin crust of ice, carrying faint reflections of starlight toward the mill. The sound is distant but constant, a heartbeat through stone. In that still hour, time feels soft. There is no measure yet, no bell, no footstep, no sound of wheel or hoof, only the waiting, and then, above the bakery, a single creak of wood. The baker is awake. He rises slowly, accustomed to the cold that presses against his skin. The straw mattress whispers beneath him. He rubs his hands together, breathes warmth into them, and sits at the edge of the narrow bed. His feet find the floorboards smooth with years, chilled by the air that has crept in from the stairwell. He dresses in the dark. A shirt of coarse linen, trousers of heavy wool, and over them an apron that smells faintly of ash and yeast. The leather cord that ties it has darkened from flour dust, ground deep into its fibers. He descends the stairs with practiced quiet. Each step speaks once under his weight, then falls still. When he reaches the bottom, the darkness folds around him like another garment. The lamp on the table waits, a small clay dish, half filled with oil. He strikes flint against steel, and a spark blooms quick, sharp, gone. Then another, until the wick catches. The flame grows, shivering, and begins to steady itself. Light rolls outward, touching the walls, finding the pale sacks of flour, the curve of the oven, the gleam of an iron hook. For a moment, he simply stands there, listening. The bakery is silent, except for the soft hiss of the lamp. He can hear the faint tick of the oven cooling, the distant whisper of the river, and the muffled stirrings of the world outside the shutter. He breathes deeply, and a scent fills him. Sour starter, dry wood, a hint of lingering smoke. It is the scent of morning, though the sky has not yet begun to pale. He kneels at the hearth and pulls away the iron plate. Within, ashes lie in small gray dunes, glowing faintly at their heart. He lifts one with a metal rod, braids on it, and watches it bloom red, like life rediscovered. He adds a few splinters of birch, thin and dry, and soon the fire begins to move, a slow unfurling, a deep breath of heat returning. He builds it patiently, piece by piece, until the oven begins to speak again in its low, familiar voice. The crackle of resin. The sigh of warming brick. The baker moves with the unthinking grace of long habit. He pours water from the jug into the trough. Cool, drawn from the well the night before. The sound is deep and soft, like the river outside when it turns against stone. He reaches for the wooden scoop and plunges it into the sack of flour. It comes up heavy, the powder shifting like snow between his fingers. He lets it fall into the water, the air around him filling with a cloud of white. He stirs slowly, the mixture thickening as it takes shape. The spoon moves in wide circles, carving faint paths in the pale mixture, then vanishing under its surface again. He adds the sour starter, its smell alive and sharp, and a handful of salt that melts into the mix, like memory disappearing into time. Tina kneads at first, tentatively, then with strength. The dough yields and resists, yielding again, changing under his palms. The movement is slow, but constant, the rhythm of muscle and breath. Each fold and press leaves the sound of soft weight meeting wood, like distant waves along the shore. The lamp flickers with each motion, throwing small shadows that stretch and fold across the wall. As he works, his mind is clear. There is no plan, no counting, no thought beyond texture and resistance. The small cues that the dough offers, the way it clings to his skin, the way it breathes. He knows by touch when it is ready, smooth now, no longer clinging, heavy but obedient. He shapes it into a round, dusts it lightly with flour, and covers it with linen. It will rest there while the oven grows hot. He wipes his hands, dust fallen like fine snow to the floor. The cat appears from the corner gray, silent, tail held like a question mark, and rubs against his ankle. He bends briefly to scratch behind its ear, and the creature purrs, a small tremor of sound that fills the quiet room. Then he turns back to the oven. The flames now run steady, their orange glow turning the inside of the dome to gold. He can feel the warmth on his face. The bricks hum softly, expanding, remembering their work. He adds another log, and the fire answers, leaning upward, painting the walls with restless light. Soon the air thickens with the scent of burning wood and heat. He takes a wooden paddle and spreads the embers evenly, pulling them toward the sides until the center is clear. The stone floor gleams faintly, darkening where the heat concentrates. He knows the oven's moods, how it breathes when too hot, how it whispers when right. He listens for the tone that tells him the balance is near. Outside, the first thin gray of morning touches the sky. The stars begin to fade. The baker lifts the cloths from the dough. It has risen, its surface soft and alive. He cuts it with his blade, quick and clean, forming marks that will open as it bakes. Not decoration, but permission for growth. He slides the loaf onto the paddle, dusts it lightly, and sends it into the heart of the oven. A hush follows, then the quiet sigh of heat meeting moisture. The scent begins almost immediately, faint at first, then growing, filling every corner. A steps bike, folds his arms, and waits. The cat curls near the fire, its sides rising and falling in small, even breaths. The lamp burns lower now, its light almost swallowed by the glow from the oven. He waits by the window, eyes on the sky. The horizon lightens to the color of pearl. The first birds stir a distant note, another answering, the beginning of the day's song. He can see his breath in the air, even inside, though the heat licks his face. The street beyond the shutters is still empty, but the world is no longer asleep. The loaf inside begins to sing, a faint crackle, a whisper of change. He opens the door slightly, just enough to let the steam escape, and the scent washes over him. Warm, sweet, alive. He closes his eyes and breathes it in deeply, as if to carry the whole morning into himself. He draws the loaf out, its crust deep gold, its edges split into gentle seams. It steams in the air, the sound small and secret. He sets it on the cooling board and touches its surface lightly, hot, crisp, alive. The first light of day slips through the crack in the shutters and lands upon it, turning the crust into bronze. The baker stands for a moment, still, his hands dusted white, his face marked with heat. Outside, A bell rings the first of the morning. He turns toward the sound, the faint smile of habit on his lips. The day has begun, and with it, the endless rhythm. Fire, flower, water, and time. From darkness to bread. From silence to light. The first sound beyond the bakery is the slow roll of a cartwheel over cobbles still wet from night frost. Its creak rises and fades between the stone walls like a tired song. Somewhere in the distance, a cockerel tries its second call, less certain than the first, and a door thuds as someone steps out into the thin dawn. The town is stirring shyly, unwilling to leave its blanket of sleep. Inside, the baker moves icily, as if guided by breath itself. The loaf he drew from the oven still murmurs, a soft clicking as its crust cools. The cat lifts its head, blinks, and settles again. He takes another lump of dough from the trough, shapes it with firm fingers, cuts a cross into its top, and slides it into the hot mouth of the oven. The smell that follows is quiet. Joy. The shutters stand half open now, and a wash of gray-blue light spreads across the room. Dust and flour glimmer in the air like faint spirit. He steps into that light, tying his apron tighter, brushing the powder from his hands. Outside, footsteps, approach measured, human, familiar. The first customer has come, as she always does, before the rest of the town believes in morning. The door opens with a small gasp of hinges. A woman steps inside, wrapped in wool, her face pale from the cold. Her breath joins the air, rising in small clouds. She smiles without words. He nods, returning the same gesture that has passed between them for years. He sets a loaf on the counter, still warm, and she lays down 2 copper coins, whose edges have been worn smooth by decades of fingers. Their exchange is quiet, the kind of silence that carries understanding instead of absence. She leaves, and the air behind her swirls faintly, then stills. He hears the rustle of her skirt against the stones outside, the fading rhythm of her steps. Already another shadow falls across the threshold of the cooper's apprentice, hair sticking from beneath a cap, cheeks red with cold. He carries a piece of coarse cloth and leaves it folded on the counter. The baker unwraps it, revealing a small bundle of oak shavings, clean and dry. "I know it's... Thanks." The apprentice nods back. Bread replaces the bundle. The rhythm of barter lives another day. One by one, they come to the butcher's wife with strong hands, a mason with chalk on his sleeves, 2 children holding between them a single coin, shiny and proud. The bakery fills with motion but never noise. The clink of metal, the hush of linen, the gentle thud of bread laid onto a board. All of it moves with the steadiness of heartbeat. By the time the sun clears the roofline, the loaves from the first batch are gone. The baker draws new dough from the trough, heavier now, meant for midday laborers. He shapes them long, dusts them thick with flour, and scores deep lines down their centers. The cuts open like smiles when heat takes them. He works without haste. The oven exhales warmth through the bricks, and sweat forms at his temples. The cat has claimed a corner of the cooling board, tail wrapped neatly over nose. He steps carefully around it, the corners of his mouth twitching in the faintest amusement. Through the half-open shutters he can see the street growing awake. Smoke curls from chimneys, gray and blue mingling with the rising breath of the town. A child runs past, laughing, the sound bouncing from wall to wall. Someone hums a hymn while sweeping a doorway. The day is unfolding, ordinary and sacred at once. He draws another batch from the oven, sets them to cool, and leans briefly against the wall. The warmth of the bricks behind him meets the cool air that slips through the window, a meeting of opposites that reminds him of dough itself, soft yet strong, patient yet alive. He drinks a small cup of ale, watered down, not for pleasure, but for balance. The taste is faintly bitter, faintly sweet, like the middle hours of a working day. As the morning widens, the light deepens into color. What was gray becomes pale gold. The baker wipes the counter, brushes the flour from the cracks with a stiff bristle brush, and watches the air clear. On the shelf by the window, the jar of starter bubbles softly, releasing tiny sighs. It smells of apples and of something more ancient of life folded upon itself, waiting. He tends to the fire. The coals glow evenly, but he knows by instinct when the oven's heat begins to wander. He slides a thin slat of wood inside, waits, counts slowly in his head not numbers, but heartbeats. Then he pulls it out. The mark the heat leaves tells him what the thermometer never could. The rightness of temperature. The readiness of stone. When everything is as it should be, he kneads again. Flour rises around his hands, settling onto his sleeves like snow. His palms leave faint prints on the dough, ghosts that vanish as quickly as they appear. Each fold, each push, builds strength. Each pause, each breath, gives the mixture time to remember itself. He hums softly under his breath, not a tune, only a vibration that matches the rhythm of his hands. Outside, a dog barks, a door slams, and somewhere a bell calls the hour of tears. The sound drifts through the window and mingles with a steady beat of kneading. Time here is not kept by bells, but by texture, by scent, by the soft weight of dough yielding perfectly to pressure. Still, the bell's voice lingers, like a reminder that the town moves beyond these walls. He sets the shaped loaves near the oven, covers them, and washes his hands in a bucket of water drawn fresh from the well. The cold shocks his skin. He likes it that way. The sting clears the mind. He dries his hands on his apron, leaving pale streaks where the water meets flour. For a brief moment, he steps outside into the alley. The sky is clear now, washed of its early gray. Pigeons cluster on the roof of the apothecary across the street, their feathers flashing silver when they turn. He lifts his face to the sun. It feels strange after so many hours of firelight. The warmth touches the tip of his nose, and he closes his eyes. He can smell the bread from his own doorway, drifting out to mingle with the sharper scents of the town tanner's lime. Wet hay, horse, sweat, river water. The smell of life itself. He does not linger. The oven waits, and waiting is its own hunger. He returns inside, lifts the cloth from the loaves, and slides them in one by one. Each disappears into the darkness of heat with a whisper. When the door closes, the world seems to hold its breath. The cat stretches, blinks, and leaps lightly onto the sill. Outside, the baker can hear faint laughter, the kind that belongs to market's opening. Two voices beginning to weave the fabric of the day. He stands at the window, watching the street below fill with motion. A cart loaded with barrels creaks toward the square. A woman sells herbs from a basket, the smell of rosemary cutting clean through the air. A boy carries a jug of milk so full it sloshes over his fingers, leaving pale trails down his wrist. He returns to the counter, his mind quiet. The smell of baking deepens. He tilts his head, listening for the song that tells him when the crust is formed. A whisper, a shift in scent, a tone that only the trained ear hears. He waits. The sound comes. He opens the oven. The light inside is golden orange, alive. He draws the first loaf forward, and its surface cracks softly in greeting. He sets it down on the board, another beside it, then another. The air thickens with fragrance rich, nutty, almost sweet, the smell of comfort itself. He opens the shutters fully now, and sunlight pours into the bakery, catching the curls of steam that rise from the cooling bread. The light turns them into ribbons of silver before they fade. Outside, a small crowd begins to form, faces familiar, expressions softened by warmth and memory. He greets each one with a nod, placing loaves into waiting hands, taking coins or cloth or sometimes only a quiet thank you. The morning passes this way, bread leaving the table, coins filling the small wooden bowl, the scent of warmth replacing the chill of dawn. The baker moves without haste, each gesture a part of a pattern he has known since youth. When at last the last loaf is sold, he stands still, watching the dust settle. The light has climbed higher, harsher now, cutting sharp lines across the walls. The oven glows faintly, tired but satisfied. He takes a deep breath, feeling the air move slow in his chest. The cat flicks its tail. The baker looks around the small room, the sacks, the tools, the bench, and for a moment sees them not as objects, but as companions. Each bears the mark of his hands, the slow polish of repetition. Each holds memory like wood holds warmth. When the rush is done, he eats. Not much, a crust broken from the last loaf, dipped in oil, and a piece of onion. He sits on the step outside, back against the wall, the street before him bright and alive. Children chased each other through the square. The air smells of bread and horses and sun-warmed stone. The baker chews slowly, feeling the crust give way beneath his teeth, the taste of salt and smoke and time. The town moves around him, but he is content to sit still. His eyes follow a thin cloud drifting above the rooftops, dissolving as it moves. Somewhere, a bell rings for midday. He stands, brushes crumbs from his lap, and goes back inside. The next batch of work is already waiting. The bells fade into the air, leaving behind a hollow calm that feels like the echo of breath after a song. The marketplace, loud a moment ago, softens as merchants settle into their rhythms. Somewhere a hammer strikes metal in steady measure, and the river answers with its endless murmur. The baker wipes his hands on his apron, then folds the cloth neatly. He opens the side door and steps into the alley, where sunlight slips between buildings in narrow shafts of gold. The air smells of yeast and smoke. He follows the small lane until it widens toward the water. The river glides past, a slow silver thread that catches the light of noon. The surface trembles under the touch of wind. On the far bank, reeds bow in unison, their heads brushing the current. The sound is small but continuous, like the whisper of flowers sifting through cloth. He walks along the embankment, the same route he has taken every day since youth. Each step brings him closer to the mill. Its great wheel turns lazily, splashing cold arcs of water that sparkle before falling back into the shadowed channel. The smell of wet grain fills the air sweet, earthy, alive. The baker pauses, leaning on the low fence, watching the steady revolution of the wheel. It moves as the world moves, without haste, without pause. Inside the mill, the sound is deep and constant, the hum of wood and stone, the whisper of grain poured between them. Dust hangs in the air, turning every beam of light to gold. The miller looks up from his work, nods once, and returns to his task. Their friendship is the quiet kind, built from years of shared mornings and the exchange of little more than nods and loaves. The baker waits near the wall while the miller fills his sack. Flour spills in a soft cascade, piling like fresh snow. The smell is clean, almost sharp, like new linen warmed by sun. When the sack is full, the baker ties it with a thin strip of hide. The weight feels right against his shoulder, familiar, steadying. He thanks the miller with a small gesture and steps back into daylight. The walk home is slow, not from fatigue, but from a kind of peace. The path runs beside the river, through patches of grass where wild thyme grows low and hidden. Bees move lazily among the blossoms. The sky above is pale, nearly white, and the air carries the hum of summer insects. He can taste salt on his lips, the residue of sweat and wind. As he nears the town, the roofs rise to meet him, brown and uneven, glinting in the sun. The bells are silent now. Only the soft rhythm of his boots on the cobbles fills the space. A boy runs past, chasing a hoop, laughter scattering through the warm air. The baker nods to him and continues on. The bakery greets him like an old friend. The smell of cooled bread still lingers, mixed with the faint ash of the morning fire. He empties the new flour into its chest, smooths the surface with his palm, and closes the lid. Dust settles around him in slow spirals, catching the light from the window. He stands still for a moment, letting the quiet fill him. Then he begins again. The dough for the afternoon loaves is lighter, more water, less salt, a touch of honey. He measures each ingredient by feel, by weight, in the hand. The wooden scoop rises and falls in rhythm, a small pendulum marking time. The sound of flour meeting water is gentle, almost shy, a whisper of dry turning to wet. He stirs, folds, presses. His hands know what his mind need not recall. As he kneads, the sounds of the street drifting through the window. A wheel creaking, a woman calling to a child, the faint clatter of pots from a kitchen nearby. They blend with the steady thump of his palms on the table, forming a quiet symphony of daily life. The cat, now awake, stretches and jumps to the window ledge, its eyes half-lidded in the heat. The oven has cooled since morning. He stirs the ashes, adds a handful of dry kindling, and leans close to blow. The faint red deepens, then flares. Flames crawl along the wood, catching quickly. He builds the fire higher, feeding it slowly until the oven begins to breathe again. The smell of smoke winds through the air, clean and familiar. The baker works with the door open. Sunlight spills across the floorboards, warming the dust, turning each speck into a drifting spark. A soft breeze carries in the scent of herbs from the nearby garden's mint. Sage, something he cannot name. It mixes with the smell of yeast and smoke, creating a harmony no perfume could mimic. When the dough is ready, he shapes it into smaller rounds, setting them on the board to rise. Each one is marked with a simple cross of his knife. Not decoration, but blessing. He covers them with linen and waits. The hour after noon is the quietest of all. The marketplace has stilled. Only the soft buzz of flies and the distant lap of the river break the silence. Heat presses against the walls, and the bakery becomes a cool refuge. The baker sits on the step outside, the shade wrapping around him like water. He drinks from a clay cup of ale, the liquid faintly warm, but it eases the dryness in his throat. His eyes half close. He watches the street. A cat from another house pads by, tail high. Two pigeons quarrel over crumbs near the well. A woman passes, carrying a basket of washing, her skirts brushing the ground. Nothing remarkable happens, and that is its own comfort. The stillness is full, not empty. Inside, the door resists steadily. When he lifts the cloth, it feels alive, as though it breathes in his hands. He dusts the peel, slides the first round into the oven, then another, until the hearth's mouth glows with promise. The air thickens with the scent of baking once more. Time slows to the rhythm of fire and breath. He sits again, this time by the window, listening. The bread expands in the heat, the crusts stretching and cracking in small size. Outside, the sun moves across the sky, and the light shifts, with it now gold, now white, now soft again. Shadows climb the walls, stretch, and fade. When he opens the oven, the glow inside feels like the center of the world. He draws the loaves out carefully, the paddles steady in his hands. Steam rolls upward, a breath of warmth against his face. He sets the bread on the cooling board, and the room fills with scent deep, nutty, complete. He takes one loaf, the smallest, and breaks it. The crust gives way with a delicate crack. Inside, the crumb is soft, the color of cream. He eats a piece slowly, savoring the work, the time, the heat that made it. The taste is simple, but it carries everything: grain, water, salt, flame, and the patience between them. By late afternoon, the town begins to stir again. The shadows of roofs lengthen, stretching toward the square. The calls of merchants return, lower now, less hurried. Children chase the last of the light, their laughter echoing down the lanes. The baker stacks the cooled loaves on the shelves, ready for the evening meal. A knock at the door brings him to his feet. It is the priest's boy, sent for the bread that will be given to the poor. The baker fills a cloth with several loaves, tying it securely, and hands it over. The boy bows slightly before disappearing back into the brightness of the street. The baker watches him go, then turns back to the fire. He adds one last log, not for baking, but for warmth. The flames climb lazily, painting the walls in soft motion. He sits beside the hearth, elbows on knees, watching the light shift and dance. His body aches in familiar ways: the shoulders, the wrists, the back, but it is the ache of work done rightly. He lets it settle into him like a quiet song. The cat curls against his leg. He reaches down, runs his fingers through its fur, feels the steady vibration of its purr. The sound fills the space between thought and silence. Outside, the sky begins to turn, the blue deepening toward dusk. He stands, opens the door once more, and looks out. The river catches the last of the sun, a ribbon of molten gold slipping between the houses. The air cools, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke from hearths being kindled for supper. The world feels softer now, edges blurred by the coming night. The baker watches until the last light leaves the water, then closes the door gently. The room grows dim, lit only by the fire's pulse. He gathers his tools, brushes the flour from the bench, and hangs the apron on its peg. The oven hums a little longer, then quiets. The cat shifts, sighs, and sleeps. Another day is done, yet the rhythm remains unbroken. In the silence that follows, he feels the promise of tomorrow forming quietly like dough rising in the dark, unseen but certain. The sun sets slowly, as if reluctant to leave. The rooftops hold the last gold of the day, while the sky above the river deepens into blue mixed with violet. Shadows stretch long and soft along the cobblestones, and the marketplace, once bright with trade, sinks into a comfortable hush. The baker stands at his doorway, the light of his oven flickering behind him, watching the town yield itself to evening. The air is cool now, scented with smoke and bread, the twin perfumes of work and rest. From somewhere nearby comes the faint sound of a lute, hesitant, then sure. A few notes drifting over the rooftops before fading into the dusk. He listens without moving. The song feels like the air itself is remembering something old and sweet. He steps back inside, closing the door gently. The bakery feels warmer by contrast. Its light steady, its smell deep. The last loaves of the day rest on the shelves, their crusts dark and fragrant. He takes one, breaks it in half, and places a portion on a small wooden plate. This he sets aside for the night watchman who will pass by later, as he does every evening. Then the baker sits by the hearth, elbows on knees, letting the heat press softly against his skin. His hands, rough and flour-stained, rest loosely together, palms up, as though he might catch the warmth itself. The cat stirs from its nap, stretches, and climbs onto his lap. Its weight is a small, steady comfort. He gazes into the fire, watching the flames bow and lift. Each log cracks quietly, releasing tiny sparks that drift upward before vanishing. The rhythm is hypnotic. He has looked into this same light nearly every day of his life, and though it changes the shape of the fire, the color of the wood, the way the shadows shift along the wall, it is always the same at heart. A small sun, a private dawn, inside the dark. He thinks, not in words, but in sensations of the day behind him. The sound of the river, the weight of flour on his shoulder, the scent of rising dough. Each memory passes like a bead through fingers, smooth and familiar. He remembers faces: the woman with her morning basket, the children who giggled when steam fogged the glass, the apprentice who traded wood for bread. He does not know their names, not all of them, but he knows their gestures, the shapes of their gratitude. In his world, that is enough. The flames settle lower. He leans back, eyes half. The sounds of the town reach him in soft waves. The distant murmur of voices at supper, the creak of shutters, the bark of a far-off dog. Above it all, the slow toll of the church bell marks the coming of night. He listens, counting by instinct. Each note falls gently, a measure of time as kind as it is relentless. He rises and stirs the fire, adding one small log, not for baking, but for company. Then he begins to clean. The broom moves in wide, slow arcs, gathering the flour dust from corners and cracks. He sweeps it into a pile and lifts it with a wooden pan. Each motion is unhurried, as though sweeping were part of prayer. He wipes the table, smooths the linen, and sets the tools back in their places. The scoop, the knife, the paddle, each one resting exactly where his hands will find them again tomorrow. When the work is done, he takes the small plate of bread and opens the door. The night air drifts in, cool and damp. A figure moves down the lane, lantern in hand. The watchman pauses, accepts the bread with a nod, and continues, his steps fading into distance. The baker stands a moment longer, breathing the quiet air. The stars above the rooftops are bright now, their light trembling on the edge of the river. He closes the door once more and climbs the narrow stairs. The cat follows, tail brushing against his leg. In the loft, the window stands, open to finger's width, enough to let in a trace of wind. The small bed waits, its blanket rough but clean. He undresses, lays his apron neatly at the foot, and lies down. The straw creaks beneath him. Sleep does not come immediately. The sounds of the town linger, a wagon rolling far away, a dog shifting in its sleep. the faint whistle of wind under the eaves. He listens until those sounds blend together and fade. His breathing slows. The cat curls beside him, a warm weight against his ribs. In the last flicker of thought before sleep, he smells the memory of bread cooling, of fire dying. Then, at last, rest takes him. Morning returns, as it always does. Not with noise, but with light. A pale stripe of dawn slips through the window and lands across his face. He opens his eyes slowly, as though remembering where he is. The cat stirs first, yawning, then jumps down to the floor. The baker sits up, his movements quiet, his mind still half in dream. The air has changed. It smells of spring, faintly damp, with a trace of green. Outside, he can hear the drip of melting frost from the rooftops. He dresses and descends, his hands brushing the familiar rail of the stair. The bakery greets him with silence, but not emptiness. The ashes in the hearth wait, gray and gentle. He builds a fire again, each stick placed carefully, the smallest flames coaxed into being. Smoke curls upward, thin at first, then full. The oven begins to warm, its hum deep and low. The room brightens as the sun rises. The baker moves easily through the motions, fetching water, measuring flour, stirring, kneading. But today, the work feels different, lighter, freer. The dough rises quickly, the air around it alive with yeast and warmth. When he shapes the loaves, he adds a handful of herbs, crushed between his fingers. Their scent, thyme, sage, a hint of rosemary, fills the room with green breath. He opens the shutters wide. The town glows in the early sun. The river flashes like glass between the houses. The bell in the tower rings, its tone bright and new. For a moment, he stands by the window and lets the light fall over his hands. Outside, the street carries the signs of a new season. The cobbles are wet, but no longer icy. The smell of soil drifts from gardens being turned. Children chase one another near the well, their laughter skipping like stones on water. He watches them until one of them notices him and waves. He raises a flour-dusted hand in return. He turns back to the oven. The loaves are ready. The fire glows steady, its breath strong. He slides the bread inside, closes the door, and waits. The room fills with the sweet scent of baking mixed with the freshness of morning air. It feels like renewal, as if the world has exhaled and begun again. Days pass. In this way, spring folds into summer, the rhythm unbroken. The baker wakes with the dawn, works through the heat, rests at dusk. The town changes around him, yet his craft remains constant. He sees it in the faces of those who come, how the children grow taller, how the women's hair lightens in the sun, how the men's hands bear new calluses from field and forge. The bread he makes is part of all of them, feeding lives that shift while his remains steady. In summer, he bakes with the door open. The air outside hums with bees and the faint rustle of leaves. The scent of bread drifts farther now, carried on warm breezes to the square. People pass, smile, nod. Sometimes they stop to rest in his shade, the smell of his fire mingling with the scent of sweat and hay. He gives them a small piece, still hot, and they eat in silence, eyes closing for a moment of simple pleasure. At night, when the heat finally fades, he walks to the river. The water moves slow, wide, reflecting the pale moon. He kneels, cups his hands, and drinks. The taste is clean and cold. He watches the reflections of stars ripple across the surface, each one breaking into light and reforming again. Behind him, the bakery glows faintly through its window, a small hearth against the dark. Autumn arrives, like a sigh. The mornings turn crisp, the evenings burn with color. Leaves gather in the gutters, crunching softly underfoot. The baker feels the change in the dough. The flour is different now, heavier from the year's end grain. He adjusts his work to match, adding more water, more time. The bread that results is darker, thicker, more patient. He begins to burn oak in the oven instead of birch. The smell is deeper, the heat steadier. When the loaves bake, their crusts carry the scent of smoke, a taste of the season itself. Customers remark on it, smiling, though none of them speak of why it matters. The flavor belongs to the moment, and the moment will pass. Evenings grow earlier. The baker lights his lamp before supper now, the flame small and golden in the dim room. Outside, the sky folds into blue, then indigo. The marketplace empties sooner. The sound of hooves and voices fades more quickly. The baker finishes his work, cleans his tools, and sits by the fire. The cat curls close to the heat, purring louder in the chill. Sometimes he thinks of winters past, of snow that covered the streets in silence, of mornings when his breath froze in the air before him. He remembers walking to the mill under a gray sky, the sound of the river muffled under ice. Those memories are heavy but not sad. They are the proof of years, of time passing like the slow turning of dough underhand. He knows another winter is coming. He can feel it in the air. The faint bite, the smell of earth growing still. When he closes the door at night, he listens to the sound of wind in the chimney and feels both comfort and solitude. The year turns, as it always does, and through it all, he bakes. The first frost arrives one morning like a secret kept until dawn. The rooftops glisten silver, and every blade of grass outside the bakery stands rimmed with ice. The air, once soft with the scent of river and field, now it tastes of stone and iron. The baker wakes before the bell, as he always does, but the cold slows him. His breath hangs before him like smoke, and the boards of the floor creak sharply underfoot. He builds the fire with numb fingers, layering kindling carefully, coaxing the flame to life. The first crackle of wood sounds louder than it should, a small defiance against the silence of the frozen world. Soon, the heat begins to spread, first along the hearth, then through the air, then through him. The oven brightens, its glow licking across the walls, and the chill recedes like fog. The dough he made the night before rests beneath its cloth, risen and ready. Uncovers it, and the air fills with a faint sour scent, deep and comforting. He kneads it slowly, feeling the resistance that comes with cold mornings, pressing until the dough softens, breathing warmth back into it through touch alone. Each motion is deliberate, steady, unhurried. The bakery feels smaller now, closed against the wind, the light of the lamp steady as a promise. Outside, the town stirs reluctantly. A wagon rolls past, its wheels cracking the frost on the stones. Somewhere a door slams, and the sound rings sharp as a bell. The baker glances through the small window. The world beyond is a study in gray smoke, rising from chimneys, roofs glittering under pale sun, the river a dull mirror of ice. The market stalls stand empty, their awnings tied down. He slides the first loaves into the oven. The firelight deepens. The smell that follows is richer now, thick with the sweetness of slow heat. He waits, leaning against the table, the warmth on his face, and the faint ache of his shoulders, reminding him that work, like life, is a circle without end. The day unfolds quietly. Few customers come when the wind is this sharp. Those who do arrive come wrapped in wool and gratitude. They stamp snow from their boots and warm their hands by the oven, while the baker fetches their bread. Their breath curls in the air like mist. They leave quickly, clutching loaves under their cloaks, their thanks muffled but sincere. Between visits, the bakery is still. The cat sleeps deep by the hearth, belly rising and falling. The baker sits beside it, the light from the fire flickering over his face. His mind drifts to other winters. The one when the river froze solid and boys skated on its surface. The one when snow blocked the road to the mill and he ground grain by hand, the sound echoing through long nights. He remembers the year the roof leaked during a storm and how the scent of wet straw mixed with yeast and ash. These memories come not as stories but as sensations. The crack of frost underfoot, the sting of wind on the cheek, the satisfaction of pulling bread from the fire when all else was frozen. They are fragments of the years that have shaped him, each one a small stone laid in the path that leads to this moment. He takes a piece of stale bread from the shelf, breaks it into the broth simmering on the hearth, and eats slowly. The flavor is simple, salt, grain, smoke, but it warms him through. Afterward, he places another log on the fire, then goes to the door and opens it slightly. The wind rushes in, cold and sharp, but with it comes the quiet beauty of falling snow. The flakes drift slowly, each one unique, yet together forming a pattern to vast a name. They land on the sill, melt, and vanish. The street is empty, the world muffled. The baker stands there a long moment, watching the snow erase every footprint, every mark of motion. Then he closes the door softly and returns to the warmth. Days pass in a rhythm of fire and frost. The mornings blur into one another. The afternoons vanish quickly into dusk. The baker works by lamplight more often now, his shadow large on the wall. He moves slower, but his motions are no less precise. The fire becomes his companion, its pulse steady as the ticking of an unseen clock. When he lifts each loaf from the oven, the light catches on the rising steam, turning it to gold before it disappears. The sound of the crust cracking fills the room like the language of heat itself. He lines the loaves on the board, each one shining faintly, a chorus of small suns against the gray outside. In the evenings, he sits at the window, watching snow fall through the lamplight. The flakes move endlessly, drawn toward the earth, yet never in haste. Sometimes he sees figures passing the watchman, a farmer returning late, a child running ahead of a parent. Their shapes blur quickly into the white. He feels no loneliness. The quiet is its own kind of company. The sound of the oven, the purr of the cat, the slow exhale of his own breath. These are the voices he knows best. When he finally climbs the stairs to his bed, the glow from the hearth follows him upward, painting his steps with warmth. The winter deepens. The river freezes entirely, a sheet of dull glass stretching from bank to bank. The mill stands still, its wheel locked in place, its troughs empty. The baker must ration what flour remains until the thaw. He measures carefully, weighing each scoop with an instinct sharpened by years of such seasons. Waste nothing, he reminds himself, though he does not speak the words aloud. He bakes smaller loaves now, dense and dark, meant to last. The townsfolk understand. Their own stores run low, yet none go hungry, not while his fire burns. He gives more than he sells these days, leaving bread on doorsteps before dawn. No one asks, no one needs to. The smell of warm crust drifting through cold air is its own kind of message. One night, when the wind howls through the chimney and snow presses against the shutters, he wakes from sleep and goes to check the fire. The coals glow faintly, enough to stir back to life. He adds wood, waits until the flame catches, and sits for a while in the half-dark. The bakery hums with warmth again, and outside, the storm rages unheard. He remembers another night, long ago, his first winter here, when he was young, when the fire refused to catch and the loaves failed. He remembers sitting in this same spot, despair heavy as frost, until the miller arrived, silent, and set the fire for him. The man had not stayed long, only long enough to leave warmth behind. The baker had never forgotten. He smiles faintly at the memory, though it hurts and comforts in equal measure. The fire crackles louder now, filling the space between thought and silence. The cat, older and slower, climbs into his lap and curls close. Together they wait for the storm to pass. By the time the snow begins to melt, the town seems to exhale. Icicles drip from eaves, the sound like 1,000 clocks restarting. The river loosens, groaning softly as it begins to move again. The baker steps outside one morning and feels sunlight on his face, sharp but kind. The air smells different, still cold, but with a hint of thaw, a breath of new life beneath the frost. He walks to the bridge and looks down. Beneath the thin ice, the water flashes, dark and restless. He knows what it means. Soon, the mill will turn again. The sacks of flour will return, and the rhythm will shift from endurance to renewal. He smiles, the lines around his eyes deepening. When he returns to the bakery, the cat follows him inside, meowing once, as if to confirm what they both know: winter is nearly over. He lights the fire with a lighter heart and begins to work. The dough rises faster. The room warms more quickly. The scent of bread returns, fresh and hopeful. The bell rings in the tower. The world has turned again, and with it, the baker's life continues. As constant as the fire, as changeable as the seasons, each day a quiet echo of all the days before. The first days of spring come quietly, without ceremony. The snow shrinks from the edges of roofs and melts into narrow rivers along the gutters. The air loses its bite, softening into something almost sweet. The baker wakes before dawn as always, but the light waiting at the window is different now, clearer, less blue, with the faintest promise of green. He opens the shutters, and the rush of cool air slips into the room. The street below is damp, shining with early moisture. Smoke rises from chimneys, not in thick columns as before, but in thin threads that vanish quickly into the warming sky. He stands there for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the scent of wet earth and ash fill him. It smells of beginnings. Downstairs, the bakery feels gentler too. The oven, cleaned and rested through the thaw, wakes easily. When the first spark catches, it burns steady, without protest. The dough he needs is lighter now, made with the last of the old flour and the first handful of new. It feels alive beneath his palms, eager to rise. The cat prowls near the door, curious about the changing air. Its tail flicks against the wall, tracing arcs of impatience. The baker smiles, a rare, small motion, and opens the door. The cat slips out and disappears into the mist, a gray shape dissolving into gray morning. He works in silence, save for the sound of water poured, dough folded, fire fed. The rhythm of it feels like breathing, the familiar cycle, finding new ease after winter's strain. By the time the first loaves entered the oven, the sun has cleared the roofline, and the room fills with gold. The smell that rises is different now, fresher, almost floral. The baker lifts his head and lets it wash over him. Bread and spring together have a scent like memory returning, something both new and ancient at once. By mid-morning, the street outside is alive again. The marketplace reopens, stalls unfolding like bright wings. Cloves of red and blue sway in the mild breeze. The voices of traders mingle with the clatter of pots, the calls of hawkers selling herbs, fish, fruit. The baker watches from his window for a moment, hands resting on the sill. A milk cart rumbles into view, two men walking beside it. The sacks are fresh, filled with the first flour ground from new wheat. The baker's heart lifts slightly. He steps outside to greet them, his boots leaving damp prints on the cobbles. The men nod, smiling through their work. Together they unload the sacks, setting them in a careful stack inside the bakery. The baker unties one and lifts a handful of the pale powder. It feels different, smoother, lighter, and the smell is alive, sharp with the scent of grain newly broken. He lets it sift through his fingers and watches it fall, a white stream catching the sun. He will use it tomorrow, when the oven has rested, when the air is warmer still. He pays the miller with coin and a loaf of yesterday's bread, the kind of exchange that carries more trust than worth. When the cart rattles away, he returns to his work, feeling the promise of the season humming quietly under his skin. In the afternoon, the bakery door stays open. The sound of the marketplace drifts in laughter, a snatch of music, the bark of a dog. The baker moves in rhythm with it all, as if the world outside were the other half of his song. He mixes a batch of dough with herbs gathered from the edge of the fields. The scent of thyme and fennel fills the room, mingling with the soft warmth of rising bread. He shapes small loaves, meant for the evening quick to bake, meant to be eaten fresh. When he slides them into the oven, the air fills with sweetness so rich it almost hums. A young boy appears at the doorway, holding a bundle of rushes. He waits silently until the baker notices him. Then, without a word, the man takes one of the warm loaves from the board and places it in the boy's hands. The child grins, teeth flashing, and disappears back into the crowd. The baker watches him go, a small warmth kindling inside that has nothing to do with the fire. As the sun tilts westward, the air grows softer, heavier with the scent of rain. Clouds gather above the rooftops, slow and gray. He draws the door half closed, but leaves the shutters open. The sound of thunder far away rolls across the valley, low and patient. The first drops fall soon after, not many, but enough to patter gently on the roof. The sound fills the bakery like a rhythm beneath his work. He listens to it, the steady percussion of spring returning. The smell of wet earth mixes with the perfume of baking bread until they become indistinguishable. When the loaves are done, he sets them on the table and sits beside them. The rain continues, light and steady. He eats one still warm, tearing it open, letting the steam rise against his face. The crust crackles. The inside yields soft and fragrant. Outside, the world turns green again. As days lengthen, the pace of life quickens. The baker finds himself rising earlier, finishing later, but with less weariness. The light lasts longer, and the work seems to follow it. The oven, once the heart of warmth in winter, now serves as a companion to daylight. Its fire burns smaller, quieter, content to assist rather than dominate. The townspeople, too, move differently now. Their steps are lighter, their laughter easier. Children race through the square chasing hoops. Women hang linens, bright as sails between windows. Men mend roofs, sharpen tools, prepare for the work of fields and harvests ahead. The baker sees it all, from his doorway, from his bench by the window, from his early walks to the river. The water runs full now, clear and fast, singing over stones freed from ice. Along its banks, reeds and willows stir, their leaves tender and new. The world breathes again, and with it, he does too. He finds small reasons to smile, the way the cat follows sun patches across the floor, the sound of rain on the eaves, the sight of steam curling upward from a loaf, just broken. These moments collect like crumbs of peace, simple and enough. Sometimes, on clear afternoons, he visits the fields beyond the wall. He watches the new wheat rise and rose, so fine they shimmer when the wind moves through them. He walks between them slowly, his boots brushing the tips. The smell of growing grain is faint but distinct, a green sweetness that lingers on the tongue. He stops at the small shrine by the crossroads, a wooden post carved roughly with a symbol of blessing. A garland of dried flowers hangs there, left by some hand he does not know. He adds a piece of bread, still warm, from his pocket, and bows his head. The gesture is not ritual, so much as gratitude for the land, for the grain, for another season begun. When he returns to the bakery, the sky has turned the color of copper. The cat greets him with a soft mew, circling his feet. He lights the lamp and feeds the fire. The evening will bring new dough, new waiting, new loaves cooling in the quiet. The cycle holds. Night comes later now. The sky remains pale long after the bell marks vesper. From the bakery's open window, the baker can see the river glinting faintly under the half-light of the moon. The sound of frogs begins, low and rhythmic, joining the whisper of wind through the grass. He sits by the hearth, the fire reduced to embers, and listens. He thinks of all the hands that touch the bread before it reaches a mouth. The reapers, the threshers, the millers, his own. Each set of hands leaves its trace, not seen, not felt, but remembered somehow by the grain itself. When Eknets, he feels them all. Like a lineage carried through flour, he knows the day will come when his own hands grow slower, when another will take his place at the oven. He does not fear it. Work done with care never truly ends. It only changes shape, passing quietly from one set of fingers to the next. He sits in that thought a while longer, until the last light leaves the window. Tenerisis closes the shutters and lets the darkness rest inside the room. The oven glows faintly, a single red pulse in the quiet. The world, for now, is enough. Summer arrives, not all at once, but in waves. A few bright mornings, a few still nights, then a day when even the wind feels heavy. The air thickens, full of bees and the scent of herbs drying in the sun. The bakery becomes a chamber of heat, the walls warm to the touch, the oven needing little fire to burn. The baker wakes earlier now, before dawn, when the world is still cool enough for breath to move easily. The sky at that hour is pale, almost white, the color of flour before it darkens under light. He works quickly, kneading by lamplight, his hands moving with quiet urgency. The dough rises faster in the warmth, eager as summer itself. By the time the sun reaches the rooftops, the first batch is already cooling on the boards, the crusts shining with a sheen of oil brushed on moments before baking. Outside, the street glows faintly, dust rises from every step, hanging in air to still, to carry it away. The smell of baking bread drifts out of the open window, and with it comes the faint sweetness of fruit ripening somewhere unseen. He hears a cartwheel creak, the soft jangle of harness, and the far-off sound of someone calling greetings across the square. The town, even half asleep, hums with life. He wipes his forehead with the back of his arm, leaving a streak of flour there, and opens the shutters wider. The light floods in, bright and unforgiving. In its glare, even dust seems alive, spinning lazily through the air. He pours water into a cup, drinks deeply, and feels the coolness slide down into him like a brief mercy. The cat lies sprawled on the floor, belly up, tail twitching, too warm to move. The baker smiles, stepping carefully around it. He lifts another tray of dough, smaller loaves meant for travelers passing through. These he bakes hotter, quicker, their crusts thin and crisp. The smell that rises is sweet with the faint temps of wheat newly milled, a scent that speaks of sunlight caught in grain. By mid-morning the heat presses hard. He leaves the door open, the street beyond shimmering. Customers come fewer now, mobbing slowly, voices lowered by the thick air. They bring cloth-wrapped coins, damp from palms, and leave quickly, bread cradled in arms, like something fragile. Between their visits, the bakery hums in low silence. The baker works shirt-sleeved, sweat tracing lines through the flour on his skin. His movements remain calm, measured, every gesture pared down to what is necessary. He bakes flatbreads for the shepherds who will drive their flocks north toward higher pastures. These are thin, meant to travel, brushed with oil and dusted with salt. They come from the oven pliant and pale, their edges curling slightly as they cool. He stacks them in cloth and ties the bundle tight. Work for the road. Simple, sustaining. When the last loaf is set aside, he steps into the light. The square beyond his door is near empty now. The stone well at its center gleams whitely, the rope dark with use. He walks to it, lowers a small bucket, and draws water that feels like cold stone in his hands. He drinks, pours some over his wrists, over his neck. The shock of chill cuts through the day's haze, and for a moment he stands still, breathing. Then he turns toward the river. Its current moves slow, the water shallow but shining, flecked with green light where the sun filters through leaves. He watches it a long while, the way one might watch a living thing breathing. The reeds bow under the weight of dragonflies. Somewhere far down the bend, children's laughter skips like pebbles across the surface. The world feels at ease, stretched wide beneath the sky. He stays until the sun begins to tilt, then returns to his bakery, the scent of water still clinging to his clothes. That evening marks the beginning of the Feast of Bread, a celebration the town holds each when the year's first grain has been milled and the new loaves are blessed. The baker prepares his best batch for the occasion. He mixes the fine flour with honey and milk, adds a handful of seeds saved from last harvest, and works the dough until it shines faintly in the lamplight. The square fills slowly with people. Candles are lit one by one, small stars glowing against the darkening sky. Musicians tune their lutes and flutes, their notes drifting between the stalls like wind among leaves. The air smells of roast meat, of flowers, of sweet wine poured into wooden cups. The baker brings his loaves to the long table set in the center of the square. They sit among baskets of fruit, wheels of cheese, and platters of roasted fowl. His bread, golden and smooth, gleams in the candlelight. A child reaches for one before the bell. His mother catches his wrist gently, smiling. When the priest arrives, the crowd falls still. He lifts his hand over the food, speaks softly, and the murmured prayer folds itself into the warm air. The baker listens, though the words are less important to him than the silence that follows that deep, collective breath of gratitude, the moment when everyone stands together in simple awareness of enough. Then the bell rings, and the square erupts in laughter, clinking cups and the sound of knives against plates. The baker steps back, content to watch. People tear pieces of bread, pass them, share them. The music quickens. A few begin to dance. Lanterns swing gently from poles, throwing moving circles of light across faces and walls. He sits near the edge of the square, a cup of ale in hand, the cat curled at his feet. The air is thick with warmth and sound, not the harsh noise of labor, but the easy hum of joy. He eats a small piece of his own bread, smiling faintly at the familiar taste transformed by celebration. It tastes of fire and field, of time and patience. When the revelry fades and the candles burn low, the baker walks home through quiet streets. The stones still hold the day's heat. He can hear the river in the distance, slow and heavy in the dark. He opens the bakery door, the scent of ash and flour welcoming him like an old friend. The fire in the oven has gone to embers. He stirs at once, letting a few sparks rise and fade. He sits by the open window, the air cooler now, and listens to the faint rustle of leaves. The moon, high and full, pours its pale light over the empty table. He feels the weight of the day settle into him, not as fatigue, but as fullness. The festival's laughter lingers in his mind, but what he remembers most is not the sound or the faces. It is the sight of hands passing bread, one to another, across light and shadow. The same act repeated through centuries, older than memory, simple as breathing. He closes his eyes. The cat shifts against his leg, purring softly. The fire sighs. The world outside drifts toward sleep, and he with it. Content in the knowledge that his small craft, his daily work, is part of something vast and unending. Morning comes again, heavy with the scent of late summer. The fields beyond the walls shimmer gold now, and every breeze carries the dry whisper of grain ready for harvest. The baker wakes before the light, his body answering a rhythm older than his will. He dresses, descends, and begins as always. Fire, flour, water, salt. The first loaf of the day cracks open in the oven, the sound small but satisfying. He smiles, unseen, and thinks how each dawn feels, both new and known. The year turns, the work remains. By midday, the heat is relentless. Even the stones of the floor seem to breathe warmth. The baker works slowly, conserving motion. Between bouchées, he steps outside to rest in the shade. The town sleeps through the worst of the sun. Dogs lie flat in doorways, and only the cry of swifts high above disturbs the still air. He watches the light shimmer on the river, the way it turns silver, then white, then gold again. The sound of it soothes him, the same constant murmur that has followed every day of his life. When he closes his eyes, he can almost hear the mill wheel turning miles upstream, the quiet thunder of water meeting wood. He rises at last, returns to his work. The fire greets him with a sigh. He feeds it gently, unwilling to stir too much heat. The dough under his hands feels soft, almost liquid in the warmth. He shapes it quickly, sits it to rise, then opens the door again to let the air move. Evening will bring relief, and with it, a quieter kind of labor. The bread baked not for sale, but for giving, for neighbors and travelers, and for himself. Bread for the end of day, when the air cools, when the town slows, when the stars begin to prick the darkening sky one by one. The baker looks toward the horizon, where the last light gathers behind the hills. Anna thinks not with words, but with a calm certainty, that this life, measured by loaves and dawns, by the small sound of rising crust, is enough. The sound of harvest reaches the town before the carts arrive. The soft drumming of scythes, a low murmur of voices across the valley, the call of crows circling over fields turned gold. The baker hears it faintly each morning, carried on the wind that passes through the open window of his room. It is a rhythm older than memory, the steady heartbeat of summer's end. He rises earlier now, before the sky shows even a hint of color. The air is cool again, touched by the faint promise of autumn. The fire catches easily. The oven warms quickly. He works in near silence, save for the sound of water splashing into the trough, and the familiar hum of his own breath. When he kneads the dough, he can feel the new grain in it. Strong, elastic, full of life. The flour from the first harvest always feels different under the hands, as if the fields themselves are still alive within it. Outside, the streets are quiet. The market will stay empty until the carts begin to roll in from the countryside. He bakes several large loaves, round and heavy, their crusts dusted with flour so fine it shines like frost. These he sets aside for the reapers who will pass by later, hungry from work, their hands raw from straw and sun. As the first light of day reaches the rooftops, the town begins to stir. From the square comes the sound of wheels and hooves, of shouts and greetings. The baker steps outside and watches as the first wagon enters, piled high with sheaves of golden wheat. Dust rises from its wheels, sparkling in the light like a slow-moving storm. The scent of cut grain fills the air. Sweet, dry, endless. He remembers being a boy and walking among such fields. Before this bakery, before this town. The stalks had seemed taller than him then. The world larger. The future endless. Now, watching others bring in what they have sown, he feels the same quiet wonder, but softened by years, an understanding that all things grow and return. As surely as dawn follows night, the carts unload near the mill, and soon the sound of grinding begins again. The baker smiles faintly, hearing the deep groan of the millstone through the still air. The first sacks of new flour will come by evening, and with them, another year's circle begins. He returns inside and opens the door wide. The bakery fills with the scent of field and fire. He shapes a new batch of dough, lighter with a touch of honey. He works slowly, deliberately, listening to the murmur of life beyond the walls. The cat curls near the hearth, tail flicking lazily. The town outside hums with the music of harvest. Footsteps, voices, the creak of leather, the rustle of straw. By midday, the air is thick with dust and sunlight. The heat of the season, long delayed, gathers in waves that shimmer above the cobblestones. Through the open window, the baker sees the farmers resting in the square, sitting in small circles, eating from baskets brought by their wives. Bread, cheese, apples, and water. The feast of labor. Their laughter drifts toward him, light and unguarded. He bakes steadily, the oven's rhythm matching his own pulse. The loaves rise tall and golden, their scent drifting into the street. When the reapers pass by at dusk, he gives them bread without being asked. One loaf for each man and woman. They take them with hands still smelling of field and sun. Their thanks are few, their eyes bright with weariness. He watches them go, feeling a quiet pride not in himself, but in the shared work of the world, each person turning raw earth into sustenance through their craft. That night, when the heat finally softens, the sky burns with the red of harvest sunsets. The baker stands by the door, a cup of ale in his hand, watching the light fade behind the hills. Smoke rises from the fields where stubble burns in slow, controlled lines, each plume curling upward like a prayer. The air smells of ash and ripe grain, of endings and beginnings intertwined. He drinks deeply, the bitter taste grounding him. The fire inside the bakery glows low. The cat sleeps near its edge, and the sound of crickets fills the silence outside. The baker feels, for the first time in months, the faint ache of satisfaction that comes not from rest, but from completion. The cycle has turned again. When morning comes, the air is cooler. Mist gathers along the river, and the cobbles glisten as if freshly washed. The baker walks to the mill, a sack of last season's flour slung over his shoulder. The wheel turns. Easily now, the water high from late summer rains. The sound of it echoes through the valley, deep and slow. Inside, the air is heavy with dust and warmth. The miller nods in greeting, his arms powdered white. Together they inspect the new grain. It runs between their fingers like fine sand, pale and clean. The baker breathes in deeply. The smell fills him, half sweet, half earth. They exchange few words. As always, the language of shared labor needs little voice. When he returns to the bakery, the first customers are already waiting, women with baskets, children clutching coins, men in shirts, damp from the fields. He opens the door wider, letting them in. The air fills with laughter, the sound of coins against wood, the murmur of appreciation as the loaves pass from his hands to theirs. The rhythm of life restored. By afternoon, the shelves are empty again. The baker cleans the counters, brushes the last dust of flour into his palm, and tosses it into the air. It drifts down slowly, catching the sunlight, glowing for an instant before vanishing. Later that week, the town celebrates the harvest feast. Tables are laid in the open square, covered in linen and flowers. The baker prepares the great loaves for the center, heavy, round, scored with deep crosses and brushed with milk until they shine. Each one is marked with the year's number, pressed into the dough before baking. The bread bakes through the night. The fire burns strong and bright, the air thick with scent. When he draws them from the oven at dawn, the loaves look like bronze shields, each one carrying the mark of fire and patience. He sets them on the table as the bells begin to ring, their sound mingling with the calls of gulls from the river and the first steps of people gathering. The feast lasts from morning until long after dusk. There is singing, the hum of instruments, the smell of roasted meat and spilled ale. The baker sits apart, content to watch. His loaves are broken, shared, passed from hand to hand. Crumbs fall like seeds onto the ground. He feels a quiet joy, not pride, not vanity, but gratitude that his small work could be part of something that binds the living to the land, the season to the soul. When night finally settles, the embers of bonfires glow red across the square. People drift home in pairs or small groups, voices lowered to murmurs. The baker remains a while longer, watching the light fade. When he rises to leave, he takes one of the small loaves left untouched, wraps it in a cloth, and carries it home. At his door, he breaks it in half, eats one piece, and sets the other on the sill for whoever might need it. A passerby, a stray, or simply the night itself. The next morning, the air smells of rain again. A new wind has arrived, carrying the first cool breath of autumn. The baker stands at the window, his cup of water warming in his hands, and watches the clouds move low and slow above the rooftops. He feels the change like a note struck deep in the chest, gentle, inevitable. He lights the oven, kneads the dough, feeds the cat. The routine feels eternal, but within it something stirs. A calm awareness that life, like bread, is always in motion, always rising, always returning to the same hands and the same fire. Outside, leaves begin to fall, one by one, silent as breath. The air turns again, and the baker keeps to his rhythm, steady as the river's voice beyond the wall. The first leaves begin to turn before the town truly notice it. At first, just a shimmer of yellow at the edge of the trees near the river, a suggestion of change rather than the thing itself. But within a week, the hills burn with color gold, copper, rust, and flame, as though the world had been lit from beneath. The baker watches from his doorway each morning as the light catches those slopes, the colors shifting with every breath of wind. The air tastes of apples now, of smoke and coolness, of time slowing down. He rises later, though still before dawn. The mornings are dark again, the stars lingering longer before yielding to the first gray light. The bakery feels smaller, its walls closer. The oven's heat is welcome now. It pushes gently against the chill that gathers along the floor. He moves through his routine with calm precision, lighting the fire, mixing the dough, checking the jars of starter that sit like sleeping creatures near the hearth. The flour this time of year is darker, the grain harder from the long summer sun. It resists water at first, then yields slowly, the dough thick and cool under his hands. He kneads longer, pressing warmth into it with patience. Each fold is an act of quiet strength, each breath a rhythm older than words. When the loaves are set to rise, he opens a door and steps outside. The air bites at his face, but not unkindly. Mist drifts low over the street, carrying the faint scent of river and leaf. The sky is pale silver. Somewhere beyond the walls, a crow calls once, then again, the sound cutting through the stillness. He listens, feeling the seasons settle in his bones. The first customers arrive wrapped in cloaks, their breath visible in the chill. They come with baskets lined in cloth, coins cold to the touch. They speak softly, their words muffled by wool and early hour. He serves them each in turn, his movements steady, his voice low. The exchange is simple, almost ceremonial, hands meeting over the bread, warmth passing from one life to another. When they leave, the bakery falls quiet again, and he sits by the window to watch the light grow. The sun climbs slowly, never quite bright, its rays filtered through haze and wood smoke. Outside, the market begins to stir. Stalls appear like ghosts in the fog, shapes taking form as canvas is stretched and poles are raised. By midday, the square hums with life. Autumn markets are different from summer ones, slower, deeper, full of the sense of preservation and trade. There are barrels of apples, heaps of onions, baskets of nuts, and bundles of herbs drying in the open air. The smell of tallow and honey, of smoke from roasting meat, drifts through the lanes. The baker carries a tray of small rolls to his stall, where his apprentice, a quiet boy with eyes like river stones, waits. They arrange the loaves neatly, brushing away stray crumbs, their motions unspoken but in sync. The boy has learned well. His hands move carefully, respectful of the bread's fragility. Even after baking, customers come and go. Some linger to talk, their words gentle. As the light, they speak of the harvest, of the coming frost, of the price of grain. The baker listens more than he answers. His voice, when it comes, is soft and steady, like the crackle of a hearth. He watches people as they move the curve of shoulders under cloaks, the way hands gesture as coins change owners. Every gesture seems slower now, as though the entire town has agreed to breathe more deeply before the long winter. When the last of the rolls are gone, the baker and the boy pack up the empty baskets. They walk home in the fading light, the street glowing amber from windows and lamps. The smell of roasting chestnuts follows them, carried on the evening wind. Back in the bakery, the fire is low, the cat asleep on the bench. The baker gives the boy a small loaf for supper and watches him go, his steps quick along the cobbles. Then he sits alone by the oven. The warmth seeps into his back, and for the first time he feels the full weight of the day. His hands, folded on his knees, are lined with small cracks, the skin rough as the crusts he bakes. He studies them for a moment. The hands that have shaped thousands of loaves, that have measured, lifted, turned, and cut since youth. He remembers their younger strength, remembers the first time he burned them on fresh bread, remembers how long it took to learn gentleness with heat. Each mark is a record of practice, of persistence, of care. He runs a finger over the faint scar that crosses his palm and feels the pulse beneath it. Steady, slow, enduring. The cat shifts, stretching, its paws kneading the air before settling again. The baker smiles, faintly. He reases, adds wood to the fire, and sits once more. The flames rise, the light touches his face, and for a while, he simply watches. As the days shorten, his steps grow slower. The chill of morning settles deeper into his joints. Yet the work continues, perhaps slower, but no less certain. His apprentice takes on more of the heavy tasks, carrying flour, stoking the fire, turning the dough in its trough. The boy moves carefully, not rushing, his eyes always glancing toward the master for approval or correction. The baker says little. His nods are enough. One afternoon, they walk together to the river, carrying sacks to the mill. The path is lined with fallen leaves, crisp underfoot. The air smells of wood smoke and damp soil. The boy talks softly of things beyond bread, of the festival soon to come, of a girl he sometimes sees at the market. The baker listens, smiling at the sound. Sunning little, he remembers being young, when everything ahead felt endless. At the mill, the wheel turns heavily, water foaming at its edges. The miller, older now himself, greets them with the easy warmth of long acquaintance. They share a moment of silence, the kind that speaks of years rather than hours. The flour is weighed, exchanged, and the sacks filled anew. The baker touches the grain as it pours, feeling its warmth against his skin. Life returning to life once again. Back at the bakery, twilight falls early. The sky outside turns from silver to rose, from rose to blue, and then to black. He lights the lamp, the glow golden against the walls. The boy sweeps the floor, the broom moving in slow arcs. The baker wipes the table, smooths the cloth, folds the remaining bread into linen. When the work is done, they share a small meal, bread dipped in broth, a few slices of cheese, and a piece of apple. They eat in silence, the kind that carries ease rather than absence. When they finish, the boy thanks him softly and departs. The baker remains, the fire before him, his thoughts drifting. He can hear the wind outside, whispering through the chimney. He thinks of all the seasons he has known, the first spring of his youth, the long winters of struggle, the summers thick with laughter and scent. He thinks of faces that have passed through his door, of hands that have touched his bread, of the uncountable mornings that have begun with fire and ended with quiet satisfaction. He feels no sorrow, only calm. The years, like loaves, have risen and cooled. They have weight, shape, and scent, but they do not last forever. What remains is the warmth left behind, the memory of nourishment. He closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the last crackle of the fire. Outside, the night deepens, the town settling into its slow, collective sleep. The bakery hums faintly with its own warmth. When he opens his eyes again, the room seems bathed in gold. He stands, stretches his back, and climbs the stairs. The cat follows, a small shadow on silent paws. Upstairs, the bed waits, simple and familiar. He lies down, the straw creaking softly beneath him. The wind sighs through the eaves, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. Sleep comes easily, wrapped in the warmth of memory and fire. The year turns quietly. Frost returns to the edges of windows, tracing delicate veins across the glass. The river slows again, its surface pale beneath the thin sun. Smoke rises from every chimney, blue and steady. The baker wakes as he always has, though his bones feel slower to rise, his breath heavier in the cold air. The cat, older too, remains curled beneath the blanket until the sound of flint striking tells it the morning has begun. The fire takes longer now. His hands, no longer swift, coax the flame with patience rather than strength. The oven answers at last with its low, familiar hum. He warms his fingers against the bricks, feeling the slow spread of heat. Outside, the bells call the first prayers of winter. The apprentice arrives before dawn, his boots tapping lightly against the stone. He carries a sack of flour on his shoulder, the load balanced effortlessly. He sets it down with care and begins his tasks without needing instruction. The baker watches, for a moment the surety of the boy's movements, the quiet confidence that comes from practice. The sight brings a small smile, soft and tired, to his face. They work side by side. The younger hands lift, stir, knead. The older shape, guide, adjust. The air fills with the smell of yeast waking, of wood smoke, of work well begun. The rhythm of the morning is the same as it has always been, yet something has shifted, a passing of weight, invisible but certain. The boy glances up now and then, waiting for a nod, and receives a tatisano. When the first light of day filters through the shutters, the bread is already in the oven. The baker sits at the table, watching the steam curl from his cup of water. His hands rest on the wood, the veins beneath his skin rising like fine roots. The sound of the fire, the scrape of the boy's boots, the crackle of crust forming, all of it folds together into a music that feels eternal. He remembers his own first winter here, the terror of failing the fire, the nights he sat awake fearing the bread would not rise. He remembers the faces of those who helped him, the miller, the watchman, the old woman who brought apples for trade. Most of them are gone now, yet their names feel alive in his chest. The bread has carried them forward, each loaf a quiet remembrance. The day passes slowly, the light never fully bright. The air outside grows sharp, the kind that makes sound travel farther. Through the window, he can see snow beginning to fall, a slow dance of flakes that gather on the sill, on the roofs, on the quiet river beyond. The boy continues his work, the same motions repeated, yet made new by youth. At midday, they rest. The baker breaks a loaf in half and hands the larger piece to the apprentice. The boy hesitates, then accepts it with both hands. They eat in silence, steam rising from the torn bread, the smell of warmth and salt filling the room. Afterward, the baker stands and walks to the door. The snow has thickened, the street covered in white, so soft it seems to glow. He steps outside, the cold biting but clean. The air is utterly still. He listens, and the world feels suspended, as though holding its breath. He looks toward the river, its surface hidden under a thin crust of ice. Beyond it, the hills are gray and quiet. Smoke rises from distant chimneys like lines drawn on the sky. The sound of his apprentice moving inside, the shifting of a stool, the closing of the oven door, reaches him faintly. It comforts him. He stands there a long time, the snow gathering on his shoulders, melting against the warmth of his skin. When he finally returns indoors, his cheeks are red and his fingers stiff, but his eyes are bright. The years ahead are few. He feels it without fear. The rhythm that has sustained him will continue without him. The fire will be lit each dawn. The dough will rise. The loaves will crack open to reveal the soft heart within. The boy will learn to read the fire's voice, to feel when the dough breathes, to know by scent alone when a loaf is ready. The craft will live, as it has always lived, carried hand to hand, generation to generation, as quiet and enduring as the earth itself. In the weeks that follow, the town changes again. Snow deepens, and the days shrink into narrow bands of light. The baker works less, resting more often by the hearth. The apprentice takes the lead now, shaping, measuring, lifting. The old man's hands hover only too correct, too steady, to pass along the last of what he knows. Words are few between them. None are needed. One evening, when the sun has already gone and the fire burns low, the baker sits in his chair by the oven. The boy stands nearby, finishing the final loaves. The air is warm, the light soft. The old man's eyes close, not from sleep, but from contentment. He listens to the sounds he has known his whole life. The faint hiss of steam, the sigh of cooling crust, the gentle crackle of firewood. He speaks, barely above a whisper, a single phrase, perhaps a blessing, perhaps only a thought aloud. The boy looks up, unsure whether he has heard, but the baker's face is peaceful, and his breathing deep and even. He sits that way a long while, until the loaves are done and the room is filled with their scent. The next morning, the boy lights the fire. He kneads the dough, opens the shutters, and begins as he has been taught. Outside, the town wakes slowly under a sky of soft white. The bells ring, the river hums beneath its frozen skin, and the smell of bread drifts through the cold air once more. The bakery feels different, quieter, perhaps, yet not empty. The cat lies curled on the bench. The same tools hang on the same hooks. The same warmth glows from the same hearth. The boy moves carefully, respectfully, aware that the room remembers. When the first loaf is ready, he takes it from the oven and sets it on the board. Steam curls upward, pale against the morning light. He places it near the window, where the sun will find it, just as the baker once did. Then he sits, hands folded, listening to the crust sing as it cools. Outside, footsteps begin to sound on the snow. The first customers are coming, their breath rising in clouds, their voices soft with cold. The boy stands, wipes his hands on his apron, and opens the door. Warmth spills into the street, carrying with it the familiar scent of bread. The cycle begins again, and so the years turn, and the seasons continue fire and frost. Dawn and dusk, flower and flame. The bakery remains, small and steadfast, a light in the quiet of the town. New hands take up the old tools. New loaves rise from the same hearth. Each one carries within it the touch of all who came before, each crust a testament to patience and care. Long after names are forgotten, the smell of bread still fills the air at first light. It drifts through the streets, down to the river, up to the hills, mingling with smoke and mist. It is the scent of labor made holy by repetition, of sustenance shaped by devotion. Some say that in the hour before dawn, when the town is silent and the stars fade, a figure can still be seen through the bakery window. A man tending his fire, hands steady, eyes calm, surrounded by the glow of endless morning. Perhaps it is memory, perhaps it is only light, but always the bread rises. Always the fire waits. And somewhere, in every season, a baker wakes before the sun, guiding the world once more from flower to first light.